Enuma Elish, Tablet 1. At a time when even the glories above had yet to be named, and unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath, it was then that the first being, Apsu, who was their source, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. At a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence, there were no names to be spoken, and no fates pronounced. But the gods were given birth within those intermixing waves. The first were Lamu and Lahamu. Their names were spoken. But once they had fully grown and become mature of form, then were born Anshar and Kishar, and they outshone them. And so many days passed by, and many years were counted. Their first son was Anu, being as great as any of his forebears, and Anshar caused his son Anu to become just like himself. From Anu came Nidamud, who was also his spitting image, and Nidamud proved to be even greater than his forebears, profoundly wise and full of insight, with strength in his limbs, more infused with might than even his grandfather Anshar, with none among the gods who could be considered his equal. That generation of gods would gather together for wild revels. So they proved bothersome to Tiamat. Their hullabaloo echoed. All this commotion proved unsettling to Tiamat's inner being, and she was bothered by all of their activity within Anderuna. There was nothing Apsu could do to mitigate their carousing, but there was nothing Tiamat would say to quiet them down. And no matter how troublesome their conduct became to her, regardless of how rowdy things were, she just put up with it. This kept up until divine Apsu, the source of mighty gods, summoned to him and spoke to his officer Mumu, saying, "Hear me, Mumu, my trusted officer, who I can rely upon. Come with me, and together we will go to speak with Tiamat." Thus they went together and seated themselves before Tiamat, and they conversed with her about their children, the gods. Apsu raised his voice to be heard, speaking heartily to Tiamat. "I have been very troubled by the manner of their conduct, so that I cannot relax during the day, nor sleep well at night. Therefore I shall bring it to a halt, and get rid of them all. Then silence shall reign, and thus we might get some sleep." But as soon as Tiamat heard his words, she became incensed. Overcome with ire, she screamed intensely at her husband. But then she soothed the fury that raged within her breast. Could we permit our own offspring to be thus eradicated? Despite their troublesome ways, we ought to put up with it. Then the officer Mumu provided his own answer to Apsu, but he spoke at odds with the advice of his mother, the earth. "Father, you ought to put an end to their annoying behavior, that one might relax during the day and sleep well at night." Apsu was in full agreement with what he said and satisfied. With thoughts of devising a vile plan for his sons, the gods, his officer Mumu put his arms around him, hugging him, and fell down at his knees and enthusiastically kissed him. Yet what they planned was conveyed to their sons, the gods, for they heard everything and were troubled, pacing about. They all grew quite quiet and sat around without speaking, until the god with the gift for wisdom and understanding, Ea, the god who was insightful, recognized their intentions. And he formulated a solution for it all, planning it out well. He concocted it with superlative skill. His spell was perfect. For when he chanted it, he calmed the turbulent waters, and abounding sleep overcame Apsu. He became pacified. He caused him to enter a deep sleep, steeped in tranquility, while the officer Mumu, his adviser, was left in a trance. Then Ea removed his belt and took his crown from his head, and took his mantle of brilliance and dressed himself in it. Then he forced Apsu down under his feet and crushed him, and bound Mumu, laying him down over him crosswise. Then he established his own residence on top of the Apsu, and he then took Mumu, holding him by his nose leash, and after he had subdued and then killed all of his foes. Then Ea raised a declaration of victory over his adversaries. Then he could rest easy within his own personal chambers, and these he named Apsu, and established temples there, making it his home. Ea lived in luxury with his wife Damkina, there within the house of fate, there in the hall of purpose. Then the Lord came, who among all was the most judicious. There within the watery Apsu did Marduk take his shape. Within the unsullied waters of the Apsu was Marduk born. From his father Ea, his mother Damkina gave birth to him. He was suckled on the milk of the goddess's own breast, and she who breastfed him embodied him with excellence, so that he had a lofty stature. The look of his eyes was intense, mature from the very first, and mighty even at a young age. When his grandfather Anu looked upon him, he was glad. His face shone greatly, his heart was exceedingly pleased, so perfect that his head was twice as lofty as any other god. Rising high above them, he was the better by every measure. Both his arms and legs were well formed beyond comparison, so that it could not be fathomed, almost incomprehensible. Moreover, he possessed 4 ears to hear and 4 eyes to see, and red flames leapt forth whenever he opened his mouth. His 4 ears were also considerable of voluminous size, as were his eyes, which were capable of perceiving anything, being unsurpassed among the gods, of exceptional build, having limbs which were mighty, and a body terrifically tall. Then Anu cried, Mariutu, my son, you are king of the gods. Dressed in a shining robe fit for 10 gods, rising above him, there were 5 almighty beams which surmounted his head, and Anu invented the 4 winds and then fashioned them. These he set in Marduk's hand, saying, Free them, my son. Then he formed dust and caused the tornado to bear it away. Then he invented the tidal swell, which aggravated Tiamat, and Tiamat was agitated and unsettled both day and night. The gods, meanwhile, were distressed and forced to endure. So with vile thoughts on their minds, they spoke to Tiamat, because at the time that they killed your husband Apsu, and you failed to stand by his side, but rather sat by silently, thus did Anu invent the 4 strong winds and tidal swell, so as to intentionally agitate you, so that we have no peace. Did you not hold your husband Apsu within your heart? And likewise the officer Mumu, who was also captured? It's not surprising you're forsaken. Are you not a mother? You are unsettled both day and night, but look at our plight. Are we not distressed? Have a heart. Do you not care for us? Look, we lack strength in our limbs, and our eyes are hollow. Free us from this distressing burden, that we might get sleep. Raise the war cry, make them pay for what they have done. Destroy this enemy, eradicate him entirely from off the earth. Tiamat listened to what they said, and she agreed with them. Yes, I think we ought to do just as you have suggested. The gods who dwell with the Apsu will suffer great misery, for they chose to do evil to those gods that gave him birth, and they gathered about and stood in proximity to Tiamat. They were brutal and planned endlessly both day and night, grumbling and fuming, all done in the cause of making war. They called together a council of war to consider battle plans. Lady Huber, who made all, produced an unfailing weapon. She brought big snakes with piercing teeth and vicious fangs. Their bodies she had infused with poison rather than blood, and she caused these raging dragons to emit deadly beams, and to wear mantles of brilliance, so that they were like gods. Then the Lady Huber raised her voice, verbalizing the curse. Anyone who gazes at them will be stricken down with horror. They will always raise up their bodies and never back down. Then Tiamat enlisted a horned snake, a Mushhusu dragon, a Lamhu hero, an Ugalu devil, a mad dog, a scorpion man, a brutal Umu devils, a half man, half fish, a half-man, half-bull, carrying ruthless weaponry and who revealed no fear in battle. Her commands were so pretentious that none could be ignored, and in addition to these, she recruited 11 more likewise, and above all of her children of the gods who had assembled, she conferred upon Kingu the chief rank amongst them all, bestowing the generalship of her army and rule of the Congress, to hold aloft the spear to signify battle, to gather the warriors. She had given him high command of the entire combat force, and placed him to be seated upon the throne of rule, saying, I have conjured a spell in your name, making you foremost among the gods of Congress. You now rule all of the gods. You will reign supreme, for further you will be my sole mate. Your order shall not be disregarded among the Anuki. She conveyed to him the tablet of fate, clasping it at his chest. What you say will not be altered, and you will speak the law. So after Kingu had received his rank, been given a new power, and had pronounced the fates of his sons, the gods, he said, what comes from out of your lips would obliterate flames. Your potent poison would serve to incapacitate the mighty. Peace and blessings to you all.